That is so dear.
Okay.
Hi. Hello, Wanangwa, can you hear me? Hello, Wanangwa, can you hear me? Lumayan kurang sama dia. Oh, I setting up, no. The audio is the problem. Let's go outside too. Hello, Wanangwa. Hello, Wanangwa, can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Wait, let me check.
Everybody on lunch.
I don't think so, but the sun's starting. Let me just check the session.
Because I'm looking for, they gave me this program, but
The whole of society approach supporting.
where is that?
This session, room 2. The whole of society approach to supporting something.
Oh, is this promoting creative innovative entrepreneurship?
No, it's not.
Martha Tankula.
This cannot be the correct.
No, that is not the correct
This is
program.
one. Let me go for the correct one. Thank you.
All right. Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you come?
You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You can?
Yeah, as a taker, come. You can come.
All right.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. We all saved the presentations. Eh? Oh, it's an anchor.
Iwe mafa ukundimva iwe. Korea off. Off and then
ufuna so ego
Martha,
wanangwa.
you can hear me now? Martha, can you hear me?
Hello?
Ukundimva baba. Iwe mafa ukundimva? Martha,
Hello?
can you ukundimva be? Sindumvega?
Tuve. Okay. Aina muntawandiva koma the other side. Sindu kumove. Koma at first, zimateka, zima
Iwe mafa so ukundimva be? Can you close the door? Do you say this? Can you close the door?
Okay, let's start.
Can you hear me? Iwe Martha,
Yes?
can you hear me now?
Wanangwa. Yeah, I can
Hello?
hear you now.
You can hear me
Hello?
too? I can
Yeah,
hear
I can
you.
hear you 100%.
Ukundimva zomveka bwinobwino zokongola?
Tapopozo kongola zichezeshi Malawi.
Kazibwerani basi, kazibwerani.
We can actually just do this like the whole day. This is bully like this is
Sakomedwe.
abantu kupita pansi abo bayithi akubangira which should be talking like
Okay.
this using internet. We are
Hello.
Hi, Andreas. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Just checking that you can hear and see me.
Nice one. Yeah, we can hear and see you.
Perfect. Good.
Great.
Let's see if
So I think
screen.
what we'll do is just get you to share the slides. I think, can we make Andreas a host? And then, okay. I think you're already a host. Do you want to give that a go?
Okay, let me try a tab, and I want this one. Don't want to share tab audio. Share. And then if I do slideshow, hopefully you can see some slides.
Perfect. Yeah, this is going very smoothly so far. Great. Yeah, those are all coming up. Fine. Cool. We got the slides as a backup on one Anglo Martha's computer, but it looks like you've well, there'll be no need for that. So if we hang on, I reckon people will probably start to come in around like from 1 onwards. Yeah. So I think we aim to kick off 5 past-ish. And then
no
if anyone comes in before that, I'll just tell them that hang on a few minutes. We're going to kick off once everyone's had time.
Yeah. I'm happy to wait as long as required. I don't think I'm going to need all that much time, to be honest. In fact, if I'm speaking for too long, I'm going to be rambling. So I'll try to keep it fairly short and sweet and let everyone go to lunch.
Nice one. Yeah, I think they'll be grateful for that. That said, we are competing against a trip to Lake Malawi. I don't know if you guys had heard about this. Yeah, loads of people from the conference have taken a last-minute trip to Lake Malawi. Yeah, it wasn't on the agenda on the on the formal schedule, but yeah, they've just left. So that would dent our turnout somewhat, but hey ho. Just for everyone who's dialed in, we'll look to kick off around 5 minutes past 1. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today and what should be a really interesting session. I will moderate. My name is Sam Hall. I work at the UK's Foreign Office African Union team based in Addis Ababa, working to grow cooperation in the fields of cyber and technology with the African Union Commission and its member states. We're really excited to be here and speaking to you all today, and grateful to the African Internet Governance Forum for having this session and hosting this excellent forum more generally. I'll start by introducing our presenter today, Dr. Andreas Hagman, say a few words about him before giving some context to the session and why we think these issues are really important. I'll then hand over to Andreas to talk more in depth about this topic. So Dr. Andreas Hagman is Head of Cyber Advocacy at the UK Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. He has a cross-functional role at DCMS, providing advice on all cybersecurity policy areas, and has worked closely with the team to develop and deliver initiatives to improve the cybersecurity skills ecosystem, something he'll talk more about today. He holds a PhD in cybersecurity, and before joining government, spent time in various parts of the private sector, including video games, defense, and insurance. As the title suggests, this session will be about the cybersecurity skills ecosystem. Many countries are finding that there are significant cybersecurity skills gaps in their labor markets, and this presents economic challenges as there are insufficient skilled people to meet the demand from growing cybersecurity sectors. It also presents security challenges as organizations across public and private sectors struggle to manage their cybersecurity risks. As in other parts of cybersecurity, these challenges have no silver bullet solutions. But in this session, Andreas will talk about why and how effective approaches to cybersecurity skills require participation from all parts of society, which is great that we have different stakeholders joining us today. With that, I'll hand over to Andreas to kick off the presentation. Andreas, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sam, for that introduction and for setting the scene very comprehensively. Thank you also to the organizers for putting on this session. And thank you to everyone joining both physically. I'm sorry I couldn't be there physically with you, but also virtually through the wonderful thing that is the internet. So as Sam mentioned, I'm going to be talking about cybersecurity skills and an ecosystem around those skills, and why that requires a good approach is to go through a whole of society approach to building that and supporting that ecosystem. So my presentation today is hopefully not going to be too long, and I'm going to very briefly start off by kind of setting the context and setting the scene for what the challenge looks like in cybersecurity skills. I'm going to base that on some data that's specific to the UK, but actually I want to draw some very general themes out of that are applicable to most contexts, including the African context. And then I'm going to talk about a vision of a cybersecurity skills ecosystem that we sort of work towards. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's the only kind of approach to an ecosystem, but it's one that works reasonably well for us, and it sort of covers these areas that are on the slide. So I'm going to talk about youth. I'm going to talk about higher education, so that's universities. I'm going to talk about adults in the skills ecosystem, and the profession as a distinct topic area. So that's the cybersecurity profession specifically, and there's a very good link to Ghana in that particular section that is worth noting. So that's kind of a vision of a cybersecurity skills ecosystem in a brief summary. So if you don't listen to anything else in this presentation, this might be the image you kind of want to take away. So let's start off by setting the scene and talking a little bit about what the challenge looks like with regards to cybersecurity skills. So the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport commissioned some annual research on this topic to help us understand what it looks like in the UK. But as I mentioned, I think some of these themes can be extrapolated into kind of broader problems that are applicable in more or less every context. And so some of the things that come out of the research we do is we find that there are both cybersecurity skills gaps and skills shortages. And the distinction there is, for us, gaps meaning that businesses don't have confidence in being able to perform cybersecurity functions within their organizations. And shortages is basically the difference between the number of vacancies, cybersecurity job vacancies, and the number of people available to fill those vacancies. And so when it comes to cybersecurity skills gaps, we find that just over half of all businesses have a basic cybersecurity skills gap. So that's not being able to, or not having confidence in performing tasks that you would classify as basic. And we normally use cyber essentials, which is kind of a gauge for assessing those kinds of skills. And then about a third of all businesses have an advanced skills gap. And advanced skills are more advanced skills like security testing or architecture or things of that nature. And then we have a figure for kind of the shortfall in the number of people we need to work in cybersecurity roles or in the cyber sector is about 14,000 annually. So we need 14,000 more people to join the cybersecurity workforce every year to make up the gap between the number of jobs available and the number of people filling those jobs. Now, the exact numbers here are, of course, specific to the UK, and they will differ depending on countries. But the key takeaway from this, the sort of theme that comes out of it, is that cybersecurity skills is a challenge at a really big scale, right? If we're talking about half of all businesses in the country having a cybersecurity skills gap, that's a very, very big challenge. And so, although targeted perhaps interventions can solve some of these challenges, ultimately to achieve change at scale, a whole of society approach is required, hence the theme of this presentation. So some other useful findings in our research: diversity in the cybersecurity sector is, I want to say it's improving from previous years, but it's still not great in all aspects. So female participation, although it has been growing, is not on parity with male participation, and this is especially the case in senior roles, so roles requiring kind of 6 or more years of experience. And although in the UK, participation from people from ethnic minority backgrounds is actually very good, again, this figure falls quite far when it comes to senior roles. And so to take these specific figures and make a more general statement, representation in the cybersecurity workforce is not necessarily where we'd want it to be. And that has knock-on effects in 2 ways. One is that if you, the recruitment pool from which people can go into cybersecurity roles is smaller because it's not necessarily tapping into the whole of society. But also the cybersecurity work itself requires a diverse workforce. Problems that cybersecurity professionals solve are diverse and require different ways of thinking and different approaches, and therefore having diverse representation in the workforce is really important to ensure that you can solve problems in an optimal way. And so this representation challenge is not necessarily limited to the UK, and you can use perhaps different diversity measures depending on your context, but these are 2 that we particularly like to draw out as being important. And then finally, we have some very useful information about some of the recruitment challenges in the cyber sector. So almost half, so more than 4 in 10 job vacancies have been reported by employers as hard to fill, i.e. they have struggled to find people with the relevant skills and experience to fill the vacant job role. Now, this speaks to, again, the 44% number is specific to the UK, but what it really speaks to is a bigger theme around mismatch between what employers want or need and what's available in the cybersecurity workforce. And this could be a combination of 2 kind of problems. One is that there genuinely is a lack of skills and experience in the workforce, and that employers need, but it might also be a symptom of employers not necessarily knowing exactly what to look for, and maybe writing job advertisements that aren't matched to what the job will actually be, or asking for unreasonable amounts of experience. And indeed, something we've kind of found recently, and I think is a fairly hot debate in the wider cybersecurity community, which is around hiring entry-level cybersecurity professionals and training them up rather than asking for fully fledged professional people to be able to come into roles. And so there's a mismatch here between kind of employers and the supply and demand, basically. And I think these themes of scale, representation, and mismatch are applicable to any geographic context. And although I provided some UK-specific numbers here, I think these are all worth bearing in mind as to why a whole of society approach is very important when it comes to building a cybersecurity skills ecosystem. So, with having set the scene, I'll move on to talking about our ecosystem that I kind of set out in the introduction. And the first part of an ecosystem, as we see it, is youth or young people. And the idea with involving young people in the skills ecosystem is to inform and inspire them about what cybersecurity is and how they can go on cybersecurity education journeys that eventually take them towards potentially cybersecurity careers, or at the very least that whatever the career they go into, they come into it with some cybersecurity knowledge, because I think most people in the audience will appreciate that almost any job can benefit from a little bit of cybersecurity knowledge, at least in a practical sense. And so how can we involve youth in cybersecurity? Well, there's kind of two distinct ways. One is through the curriculum, so that's that cybersecurity is taught in lessons in schools, and the other is extracurricular, and that means that cybersecurity is taught outside kind of core lessons through other activities. I think good example of where cybersecurity has been included on the curriculum and is taught as part of school classes is in Estonia. It's largely framed there around digital safety, but it is included, I believe, from the age of 6 to age 14. Every young person learns about cybersecurity in some way. And actually, this is not necessarily a unique example. I think many countries at least include IT or ICT or computing in some form for on their curriculum, and some parts of that will include safety and or security elements, without necessarily focusing on those elements. And I think that's perhaps where more effort could be made in including cybersecurity very explicitly from those young ages. Conscious, however, that changing education systems can be difficult and can be a long process. Indeed, in the UK case, changing curriculum requires quite a lot of evidence work, because if you change something in school today or tomorrow, you're not necessarily going to see the impact of that for many years down the line. And so that's cybersecurity being quite new in the grand scheme of things. And that's something that we're hopefully working towards. But in the meantime, one thing that's relatively quick and simple to implement are extracurricular activities. And so that could be things like after school clubs, or it could be material that's available to students, or indeed teachers, or indeed parents or carers to engage with outside that kind of core lesson time. And so there's a couple of examples here. I'm aware that in South Africa, Kritzinger has produced guidance and material that's available for young people to engage with outside the classroom. Although my understanding is this is very much kind of a voluntary thing. And then in the UK, we have a new program which we call Cyber Explorers, which is actually an online platform that students can access. And it's a lightly gamified kind of environment where students go on a sort of learning journey to discover various cybersecurity topics in the context of various professional roles that kind of appeal to a young audience. So, for example, there is an environmentalist and the impact that cybersecurity and digital technologies has on that person's activities. Or there's a sports person. There is a kind of a social media influencer type character, and there's a scientist and a doctor as well. And so these are all kind of professions that young people may look to enter, and the platform provides that as the anchor point for then teaching cybersecurity lessons and the impact that cybersecurity has in those various areas. So Cyber Explorers is free for students, and it's run as a kind of outside the classroom activity, so students can engage with it from their own homes if they want to, and it's a very engaging kind of platform, and using an online platform also helps with scale and reaching people both in terms of number of people, but also geographically spread across various regions. So when I mentioned that scale problem earlier, Cyber Explorers help us achieve that scale to some extent. So we're talking about tens of thousands of young people accessing this platform and going through and learning the content. And the idea here is that they're exposed to cybersecurity, so they're informed about it, and perhaps are inspired to seek out more information. They're inspired to take perhaps or access further material that's available, or they're inspired to make choices in their education that would set them on a path towards a cybersecurity career. So this is a very good way of kind of capturing that youth part of the cybersecurity skills ecosystem. Let's move on to higher education, which is sort of the next step in I guess, an educational journey. And here the idea is really to build and sustain almost like the pipeline of people coming through that education system, because if you generate a lot of demand at younger ages, you want to ensure that there is sufficient supply of perhaps cybersecurity degrees, but also other pathways to enable them to get all their skills, make them ready for the workplace. And there's a number of useful activities that can be done in the higher education space. Some of it is around signposting quality courses and programs that are run by universities. So we do this in the UK. I'm going to talk about academic centres of excellence in a minute, but actually there are examples in other contexts that do this. So I know the University of Mauritius runs a program that I think is joint with the University of Arizona. And because of that tie-up, it meets the kind of academic requirements from the National Security Agency in the US to kind of get accreditation from them that says this is a quality course and you learn verifiable skills on it to take you towards a cybersecurity career. And so being able to label programs or courses or universities with this kind of quality assurance can be really useful to help students choose the right courses that will set them on an appropriate career path. There's also some useful activity that can be done here and that we're doing around broadening the expertise available in universities beyond those academic silos that can often exist in university environments. And so there's plenty of very good cybersecurity expertise that doesn't necessarily get applied elsewhere. And by elsewhere, I mean both elsewhere within the university. So that's ensuring that students on other degrees or courses, so not necessarily cybersecurity courses, not even necessarily computer science or technical courses, but they could be in history or law or biology or architecture or whatever course you want to name it, that those students also have opportunities to engage with cybersecurity in some way, whether that's through kind of online videos or some sort of short lectures or seminars. That's often really, really useful for making sure that those experts that sit in cybersecurity departments engage with the wider university student body. But also, there's a lot of value in making sure that those experts go and engage outside the university itself, especially with the kind of, if they are based in a local community where perhaps there are businesses or community interest groups that academics can engage with. That's a very useful way of ensuring that the expertise that sits in academia gets kind of proliferated to the wider society. And so to this end, I'm going to talk about intellectual property in a second. But to achieve some of this broadening of expertise to the whole of society, in the UK, for example, we operate academic centres of excellence in cybersecurity education. And this is similar to that NSA program I mentioned. This allows us to assess universities against a set of criteria, and we do publish all of this. Actually, I should say, throughout this whole presentation, I'm telling you things that are available to find more information about. So you should hopefully be able to locate that easily, but I'm happy to provide further documentation information afterwards if necessary. But the Academic Centres of Excellence program is a way for us to basically badge universities that not only provide quality courses in cybersecurity, but also do this broadening of expertise type activity. And so that's going to involve exposing students in other subject areas to cybersecurity, but also engaging with that wider community to ensure that local businesses and local interest groups have a chance to engage with those cybersecurity experts to sit in the university. And assuming that a university can show that they are doing this, we give them a nice badge that says, yep, you are an academic center of excellence. And that in turn helps the university attract new students. It helps the university attract perhaps funding from other sources. And indeed, it helps them build those networks with businesses that are so useful. We also have a little bit of funding available for projects for these universities as well. And then the final point here around protecting intellectual property is that engaging the academic expertise in the university for protecting the university's own IT infrastructure can be very, very useful. We know, and there's plenty of evidence available in the public to suggest that universities are and have been targets of cyber criminals and indeed cyber espionage. A lot of kind of the research that happens in universities has high value from an intellectual property point of view, and it's important the universities can protect their infrastructure to protect its intellectual property and indeed perhaps sensitive student data and things of that nature. And so being able to tap into the academic expertise in cybersecurity departments is very, very useful for the operational departments in cybersecurity. And so this helps, so sort of engaging with the higher education part of the ecosystem really helps broaden universities outside their little academic kind of world and to engage with the whole of society, which is the kind of theme we're going for here. Let's talk about adults as well, because I've spoken about youth, which is sort of, I guess, from age kind of 6 to 16. I've spoken about higher education, which kind of covers off young adults. But what about adults who are coming at cybersecurity from a slightly different route? And here the idea is to perhaps fill the kind of short-term demand and also increase accessibility of cybersecurity as a career. The short-term demand point is that doing a lot of work with youth and with higher education lays a fantastic foundation, and it creates a good pipeline for people coming into cybersecurity in the future. But of course, someone who starts school tomorrow is not going to be working in cybersecurity for another 15 years or so, potentially. And so we already know, as I said right at the start, that there is huge demand today for cybersecurity professionals. And so there is scope to support people who are in the workforce or want to re-enter the workforce, but want to go into cybersecurity. So this might be that they are already working in another field and they have seen cybersecurity and they think it's something that they are attracted to. And we want to support those career changes to change from their current career to a cybersecurity career, or indeed people who have been outside the workforce for some reason, either temporarily or in the longer term. It could be things like they've been on parental leave, or maybe they've been caring for someone, or another reason why they've been out of the workforce and they want to re-enter the workforce. And again, they've seen cybersecurity as something that they are interested in. So it's possible to run programs for people who are kind of on this trajectory. We, for example, at the moment in the UK have a program called Upskill in Cyber, which is kind of a boot camp type idea. So it takes people on a 10-week training course to give them a kind of very fast-paced introduction to cybersecurity in a very practical way. And they come out of that program with basic cybersecurity skills, so they can actually perform cybersecurity tasks. But importantly, we also, the program also links them up with employers, so they come out of the program with at least a guaranteed interview for a job. And so this is a very handy way of fast tracking people into cybersecurity careers, although it is quite intensive, because learning a lot about cybersecurity in 10 weeks is quite full on, but it can be useful for people who are willing to kind of invest time in that. And then finally, let me talk about the profession. So I've spoken about kind of how we can create a pipeline of people going from youth to higher education or adult retrainers going into cybersecurity. Well, part of the challenge for the past few years has been around, well, what is cybersecurity? What does it mean to work in cybersecurity and be a cybersecurity professional? And so this has had knock-on effects in terms of people not necessarily having a good idea of how you become a cybersecurity professional, what are the starting qualifications or experience you might need to work in cybersecurity, and indeed, what are the different jobs available in cybersecurity. The audience will no doubt be very aware that cybersecurity is a broad field with a very large variety of roles available. And the lack of clarity does not help with attracting new people to cybersecurity. And so work around the profession in terms of an ecosystem is around formalizing the profession and to some extent quality assuring it as well. So I mentioned quality assuring perhaps degree programs, but you can to some extent quality assure cybersecurity professionals by formalizing their profession. And there's a few things that can be done here. One is around kind of structured pathways, and that's around kind of clarifying what are the different roles available in cybersecurity, and how does one start a career in one of those roles and then go on a career journey, and where can that journey take you in terms of roles and seniority, but also clarifying things around what are the kinds of rewards that are available. I think we're very aware that cybersecurity is a fairly high-paying profession, and making that clear can help attract more people in. It's a very simple incentive. But this requires structured career pathways. Some of that is just around clarifying what already exists, but some of it might be around taking some more kind of formal actions to ensure that the pathways are more set. And some of this comes to the second point, which is around professional regulation. So cybersecurity is, I'm sure you'll all agree, a very important area to work in, and as with other important areas, it might be that regulation is appropriate. So in the same way that, for example, at least in the UK, being a professional, a doctor, like a medical doctor or an accountant, requires you to have professional recognition, it may be appropriate for cybersecurity professionals to also have similar recognition. And this would be kind of through regulation, and specifically through something like licensing. And it's, well, we're keeping, I think, a fairly close eye on Ghana specifically in this case, because they have introduced an intent to start licensing of cybersecurity service providers. That can be both institutions, but also individuals, as far as I understand it. And so this is a way of, well, if you're providing a license to someone to practice, you're in a way quality assuring their skills and experience as someone who is appropriate for practicing cybersecurity. And this is actually, in the UK, we have looked at something similar. We ran a public consultation this year on it, and the evidence from that public consultation suggested that actually the landscape in the UK is not appropriate for kind of regulating at this moment. And so we have helped set up an organization called the UK Cybersecurity Council, which is an independent body. It's not a government organization. We've helped create it from government, but it's completely independent. And they exist to help kind of formalize the UK cybersecurity profession, partly through providing information about career pathways, but also around building what we call chartered status, which is, for example, if you are an accountant in the UK, you often have chartered status to be a kind of practicing accountant. And the UK Cybersecurity Council is building that chartered status for cybersecurity professionals. It's not quite the same as licensing, because you can, it's more of a kind of a quality control check mark. So if you're a chartered cybersecurity professional, that gives you some assurances as a purchaser that the services or you are buying from that chartered person have some quality guarantees behind them, compared to buying services from someone who does not have that chartered status. And so that's the approach we're taking at the moment. But as I said, keeping a very close eye on Ghana's approach, because I think they are at the forefront in that sense of professional regulation of cybersecurity. And so that's the profession in a nutshell. So I've talked about youth, I've talked about higher education, I've talked about adults, and I've talked about the profession as an ecosystem that really touches on every part of society, because you hopefully have picked up in my kind of presentation that I talked about school kids, both inside and outside the classroom. I talked about academics and how you can help those academics reach to wider audiences, both inside universities, but also local communities. I've talked about adults who might be coming back to the workforce from other responsibilities. And I've talked about the profession and attracting people into cybersecurity. And so the kind of conclusion here, and that's my concluding slide. The conclusion here really is that cybersecurity, in terms of skills, it can't be solved by one single program or one single initiative. It really does require a whole of nation approach to building an ecosystem that can effectively nurture a diverse and sustainable supply of people working in cybersecurity. And so I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Andreas. That was a fascinating presentation. I have one question in the room from Saud from Algeria, so I'll hand over to her. And then if anyone who's online, dialed in, would like to ask Andreas a question, please put it in the chat, and then I can then pose it to him.
Thank you, Mr. Andreas, for this useful presentation. So my name is Suad from Algeria. I'm one of the youth IGF coordinator here. So you talked about youth in the beginning of the presentation, and my question is, what should youth, like young people, either in the technical field or not, be learning about cybersecurity? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. It's a really good one. There are, I guess there's a couple of, there's two answers actually. There's like kind of what should be the content of what they're learning, and then there's how should they be learning it. So I think cybersecurity can often be like an off-putting term in some ways, because it sounds kind of serious and scary and very technical, when we actually know that cybersecurity is not reserved for people from a technical background. It should be accessible by everyone. And for young people in particular, framing cybersecurity in that kind of digital safety language makes it very relatable. Young people use digital technology increasingly, and they are perhaps increasingly reliant on it. And so it's something they're familiar with engaging with. And so if you make cybersecurity familiar, that helps young people access the kind of cybersecurity topics. Now, what should be included in cybersecurity topics? At least in the UK, we would say that the material is covered by Cyber Essentials, which is available online. It's guidance produced by the National Cybersecurity Center. That's a very good basis. And some of that is really simple. It's some things around password guidance, setting up kind of two-step authentication, and things like that can really help young people protect themselves while they're online. So for young audiences, it's not necessarily about emphasizing impacts on kind of organizations and companies, because frankly they don't work, so they're perhaps less interested in that, but it's about their own data and their own security when they're kind of navigating the online world. And so couching cybersecurity in those terms, I think, can be very helpful for engaging young audiences.
Thank you, Andreas. Do you have any follow-ups on that, Suad? Okay. In that case, just one final question from me, if we have none on the chat, and that is, so it's great that we're providing cybersecurity skills training across the ecosystem, as you've outlined today. How do we make sure that that training doesn't go into the hands of nefarious actors and perhaps enable the next generation of cyber criminals?
Yeah, that's always an interesting question that tends to come up. And so for this, I think it's very important that any cybersecurity training program, whether it's for young people or for adults, doesn't just focus on the technical parts of cybersecurity. Although those hands-on skills are often what employers are looking for, and what's actually required to be a cybersecurity practitioner. At the kind of outset of any kind of training program, really there should be content on kind of ethical behavior for cybersecurity professionals, to ensure that a kind of or the basics of what makes a good cybersecurity practitioner and a maleficent cybersecurity practitioner very obvious from the outset, and ideally you end up attracting the right kinds of people to the programs, because they are the people who will use those skills for good rather than try to do something that is perhaps criminal in the end. And so I think including these non-technical topics, for example, ethical behavior, is really, really important to do from the outset. It shouldn't be an add-on to any training program. It should always be right at the start as one of the introductory parts of the program.
Thank you very much. And with that, I think we'll let everyone go and have their lunch. But thank you for your presentation today, Andreas. And yeah, I'm sure I speak for myself, others in the room, and the online audience in saying we learned a lot today. So many thanks, and hopefully see you at next year's African IGF.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, Andreas, apologies. There is now a question online. My problem for not being diligent enough and checking the online chat. We have the question, Andreas, what are your thoughts on certification versus experience?
Certification versus experience. Fantastic question. It's an ongoing debate. So, at least from the evidence we have, there is demand by employers for kind of both certifications and experience, annoyingly. Now, in the certification space, there's a lot of conglomeration around very specific certifications. So I'm thinking specifically of something like CISSP, which is a professional qualification that a lot of employers ask for. There's a slight challenge around that particular one and others in the space actually indeed in qualifications in general, is that employers often ask for certifications without necessarily knowing what those certifications provide. And CISSP seems to be one of the kind of bigger challenges in this area. And it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because a lot of employers ask for CISSP, and because other employers are asking for it, people go and get it, and because lots of people have it, more employers ask for it, and it sort of snowballs in that sense, which isn't necessarily useful, because often an employer doesn't really need someone with that particular certification, and this does apply to other certifications as well. So I think a bit of work is needed by employers to actually assess the skills they need in particular roles, and what the applicable certifications are for that role. Now, on experience, and I sort of did mention this earlier, I think one of the challenges that's kind of not helping with cybersecurity skills gaps and shortages is perhaps a reluctance to hire people with less experience and train them up, rather than hire people who already come with lots of experience. There's a follow-on from that, which is that that drives prices of cybersecurity professionals up, it drives wages up, because if you're always hiring experienced people, that costs more. But if you're hiring inexperienced people and training them up, that comes with a lower entry point. The challenge here, of course, is that's all well and good for big companies, and I can go and tell big companies to say, hey, why don't you try hiring some less experienced people and train them up, because they have resources to do that. But if you're a small or medium company, you don't necessarily have the resources or time to undertake that kind of training, and you really do need a fully fledged professional with lots of experience and indeed potentially certifications to do the role. And so asking small and medium companies to do the same thing can be very difficult. And so there's kind of all these constant tensions and balances between certifications and experience, depending on who is doing the hiring and what the role is. There's definitely a place for both. There's a place for certifications, and there's absolutely a place for experience. And so one final point from the experience bit is the one thing that we're really trying to change in our education system, both at kind of the youth level, but also at universities, is that students who go through cybersecurity or computer science or other related programs have at least some period of work experience during that program, so they have some exposure to the world of work. And that's because employers continually tell us that graduates come out with degrees that are too theoretical and they want some more hands-on expertise. And so I'd always encourage any businesses that are listening to engage with your local education provider to see if you can provide students with that initial experience, even if it's only a short period, because it really helps make those lessons that young people learn in school or university into practical experiences that they can take into the workplace. And so I'll leave that at that. But it's a very good question.
Thank you, Andreas, and thank you for that great question. Okay, with that, and I think I am right in saying this time that there are no final questions, we'll wrap it up there. But yeah, thank you again, and thank you everyone who's joined, both online and in the room, and hopefully see you all next year.
Thanks a lot.